Roger Keeler, and I am a priest, a presbyter of the Archdiocese of Edmonton in Canada, which is about 1,700 miles north of here. That's north, isn't it? That's north? See, I'm all confused. So some people say, well, that doesn't make sense. Can you kind of put that in perspective? And they say, well, it goes like this. If you got in a car in Billings, Montana, and you drove due north for about 8 hours at 60 miles an hour, and you didn't stop once, you'd hit Edmonton. Right? So it's a city of about 1 million people. It's about the same size as San Antonio overall, except we have many more tall buildings than you do. And like Texas, we have oil, and we have lots of cattle, and well, we're all rednecks there too. It's all kind of and one of the big differences is that in Canada, we just don't carry guns, but that's a minor difference. So I feel really at home in Texas. And I'm delighted to be here to celebrate this parish mission with you. My job right now is really a tough one because I'm supposed to preach a homily. So a homily is a very privileged kind of preaching. You're supposed to take the readings from today's liturgy, and I'm supposed to break those readings for the nourishment of this assembly in this place in this time. Plus, I have to remember that somehow today is Lectare Sunday, which is the Sunday of joy and kind of a high point in their Lenten journey. Plus, I'm supposed to introduce the parish mission to you and let you know what the key themes are. Plus, I'm supposed to direct it somehow toward the Eucharist that we're about to celebrate. And I need to do that in less than 10 minutes. So I just want you to know I feel really set up here. We're celebrating a synod. This is part of our context that Pope Francis has called the whole world into a conversation. And it's really something that's extraordinary in the life of the church. We've never seen anything like this before, ever, in our history. It's quite remarkable. And in so many ways, this is something that's very, very much consistent with who Papa Bergoglio is. Right at the beginning of his papacy, he said that he wanted very much to enter into a whole new conversation with the church and with the world. And he wanted to bring people together to talk about things. He gave that to us in his very first apostolic letter, just months after he was made pontiff. And we can see a straight line from Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel, to the call for synod. And he wants us to be a church of synodality. Now, what the heck is that? We'll break that out a little bit more fully this evening, but to be synodal means that we journey together. We're on a common journey together. And if we're journeying together, that means that we support each other, and we laugh with each other, and we try to figure out where we're going, and we make sense of our experience. That's part of what synodality is all about. But to be asked to preach a parish mission on synodality, this doesn't make sense. I teach canon law. I'm a lawyer. Oh, give it up. As soon as I said lawyer, the guy back here just did this. That was like an I Dream of Jeannie thing. I think he really intended for me to disappear. So I'm a canon lawyer, and I teach synodality to my students, and what that means and how we celebrate a synod at the diocesan level. So to say that somehow I have to take something that is more legal and somehow try to make it spiritual, because Lent is a time of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, and we're in Lectare Sunday, and we're looking forward to Holy Week coming up. But this didn't make sense to me. But then we're coming out of the week where we've just celebrated the feast of the Annunciation of Mary. And today we have this gospel reading that we all know so very well. The Prodigal Father, sometimes called the Prodigal Son, and sometimes called the errant attitude older brother. And in putting those things together, it seemed to me that we could have several days of conversation and prayer, not about synodality itself, but rather the postures that you and I might need to adopt so that we might become a synodal people. And I think the younger son really shows us what those postures are. The first one is humility, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And of course, he shows humility. I mean, he's driven into a place of abject poverty and humiliated even worse than that by being a good Jew and asked to take care of pigs, which is just a reprehensible thing for a Jewish mind. And that humbling, that breaking down causes him to come to new awarenesses. So we're going to look at humility as the first posture, except that I'm going to say that it has little to do with being broken down and little to do with wallowing with pigs. I'm going to actually say that the humility is discovered when he gets a ring on his finger and a new cloak over his shoulders and sandals on his feet and is invited to a feast. There's the humility. So we have to look at humility in a whole new way. Because if we can unpackage humility in a new way, then I think that we can enter into a process of synodality. The second thing I want to talk about, and that's going to be tomorrow night, is the notion of receptivity. Mary showed us receptivity when Gabriel showed up. And what was really interesting about Mary's receptivity is that it wasn't one that just said, well, where have you been, Gabe? I've been waiting here all afternoon. You're late. Let's do this. That didn't happen. The angel appears to Mary, and what are his first words to her? Hail, full of grace, don't be afraid. I'm bringing you great news. And Mary's response was not, oh, okay, great. Her response was to stop and to ponder these things. To ponder means she questioned, she wondered, she weighed, she tried to figure out what blazes this is really all about. And only when she went through the period of pondering, she asked questions. How on earth is this supposed to come about? Who do you think I am anyway? I'm not that kind of girl. And gets a response from the angel explaining to her what would happen. And then after yet another period of sort of pausing and thinking, she, understanding the consequence, says, then let it be done to me according to your word. Receptivity. And look at the receptivity of our young friend today, wallowing with pigs. As he's thinking this through and wondering about it and trying to make sense of it, he says, what am I doing here anyway? I've got this idea. I don't have to wallow with pigs. At least I can be treated like a hired hand and go back home. I don't need to be treated as a son, but there's the receptivity to a fresh idea. To be a synodal people means to be receptive to new ideas. To new ideas that are implanted in us by the Spirit of God, who's constantly leading us into new communion with God and new communion with one another. And our receptivity also implies a willingness to listen to you. God forbid that I want to listen to you. But then, if we've unpackaged our humility together, maybe I've got a ground, a being that will enable me to listen to you. And then when I've gone through the humility thing and I've done the receptive thing, then I just might experience conversion. And the young son experiences that, doesn't he? I'm just going to get up and I'm going to go home and I'm going to apologize and I'm going to hope for the best. That's a moment of conversion. And for you and I as Catholic Christians, we very often talk about conversion as being this turn away from sin and be faithful to the gospel. Remember Ash Wednesday? Those were the words that were spoken over us when the ashes were imposed. There's another meaning to conversion. Conversion means to change my mind, to shift my mindset, to have a new way of thinking about things. And we want to explore conversion. We want to explore new ways of approaching old problems. That's what a synod is really all about. It's trying to find fresh new ideas. We're going to celebrate and talk about that on Tuesday evening, and we're going to make it possible for us to celebrate the sacrament of reconciliation. But to make that easier for all of us, as you leave today, you're going to get just a little bit of a flyer that's an examination of conscience. It'll help us to kind of zero in on what it is we're doing. So that the hope that I had that night is going to be that we'll talk about conversion for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. We'll shorten the presentation that night, a very, very short liturgy, and leave lots of time for us to encounter the presbyters who have been asked to be with us to celebrate. Fair enough? But then after we've kind of explored humility and we've kind of explored receptivity and we've changed our minds, well, there's only one question we have to ask. Where the heck do we go from here? What's in front of us? And so the third night is going to say that a synodal people are people who dream dreams and have visions of new things and move into community in new ways. And we're going to explore that together. See how much we have to grow and to learn with each other? What joy it gives us that it is the Lord who has decided this for us. Because you know what's really interesting? Is that while we think that that young man did all of this on his own, he didn't. He could only do all of that stuff because God was active and working in him. Everything that he experiences, including the ultimate reconciliation with his Father, is all because that's what God wanted. God was the one who was active and working and prompting and calling and urging and drawing and then embracing and delighting. And that's what God is doing for us too. That's what God is doing for us. It's a great gift. And that's why we've gathered here this morning in Eucharist, in thanksgiving. For God has begun a great thing in us. And by his grace is allowing it to grow in us. And he's doing it in us, not only for our good, but for the good of all of his people and for the salvation of the world too. 2 minutes over time.